You're tuning into the deep dive because, well, you want to get up to speed on important stuff, right? Quickly, thoroughly, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Exactly.
And today, we're tackling something that really impacts how a huge chunk of tax money gets spent: federal procurement. We're looking at President Trump's executive order from just a couple of days ago, April 15th. It's called Restoring Common Sense to Federal Procurement. And there's this, well, ambitious plan alongside it to overhaul the FAR.
The Federal Acquisition Regulation.
Yeah.
And this isn't just minor tinkering, you know.
Right.
The FAR, it governs almost $1 trillion in government spending every year. So when an administration talks about a major shift like this revolutionary reform, as our sources are calling it, well, you need to pay attention.
Definitely. So our mission today is to kind of pull out the most important parts of this whole initiative, understand the potential impact.
Precisely. Cut through the noise for you. And we're basing this on commentary from some senior Trump administration officials, Kevin Rhodes, Stephen Ahikian, and Josh Gruenbaum. Their thoughts were in a government executive article that came out just yesterday, April 16th.
Got it. So let's start with the basics. Why? Why do they think this massive overhaul is needed right now? What's wrong with the current system, according to them?
Well, based on what Rhodes, Ahikian, and Gruenbaum are saying, the current setup for federal buying has some pretty serious problems.
Like what?
They describe it as being really burdened by waste, confusion, and just a whole lot of red tape.
Sure.
And they kind of make that point. They bring up those, those infamous examples you sometimes hear about, like the government supposedly paying crazy prices for things.
Oh, like the $10,000 toilet seats?
Exactly. That, the $1,200 coffee cups, apparently $16,000 mini fridges, things like that.
Yeah, those definitely stick in your mind.
Yeah.
But it's got to be more than just a few overpriced items, right?
Yeah.
What are the bigger systemic issues they're pointing to?
Oh, absolutely. They argue that the sheer complexity of the current system actually ends up favoring the bigger established companies. The phrase they use is ineffective and entrenched vendors.
Okay, why? How does complexity favor them?
Well, their reasoning is that navigating this really intricate web of regulations, it takes a lot of resources. Lawyers, consultants, people who specialize in this stuff.
Which is the big players have.
Which the big players often have, yeah. And that, they argue, puts smaller businesses, maybe ones that are more innovative or could offer a better price, at a significant disadvantage when they try to compete for government work.
So the rules themselves, just by being so complicated and numerous, could be unintentionally blocking the government from getting better deals or newer tech.
That's the heart of their argument, yes. They really emphasize the size of the FAR. They say it's over 2,000 pages long, contains more than 3,000 different directives, and apparently weighs over 5 pounds.
A 5-pound rule book. Okay, that paints a picture.
Yeah, they call it a Byzantine maze. Gives you a sense of why they feel simplification is so essential.
It does. Though I suppose one could argue that maybe those rules built up over time to try and ensure accountability with public money.
That's a fair point. There's always that tension between flexibility and preventing fraud or waste. But their focus right now is definitely on the maze aspect.
Okay, so given this diagnosis, the maze, the complexity, the waste, what's the proposed cure? What are the key changes they're actually planning with this revolutionary reform?
Right, the solution. Their stated goal is to inject, and these are their words, common sense, innovation, competition, and value into the whole process.
And how do they plan to do that specifically?
Okay, several key actions.
Right.
First, they want to rewrite the FAR using clearer language, plain English, they call it. The idea is to make it just easier for companies to understand what's required and how to comply.
That seems pretty straightforward. Hard to argue with clarity. What else?
They also intend to eliminate, again, this is their phrasing, nearly all non-statutory and duplicative regulations. So a pretty significant pruning of the existing rules seems to be on the table.
Non-statutory means rules not explicitly required by law passed by Congress.
Generally, yes. Regulations added through administrative processes over time. And they specifically call out removing elements related to DEI, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Okay.
as well as tackling waste and what they refer to as wokeness within the regulations.
Right. And it's probably worth noting that terms like wokeness can mean different things to different people, so the specifics of what regulations fall under that would be key.
Absolutely. Clarity on which specific regulations are targeted under those labels would definitely be needed.
So simplifying, focusing the rules. Are there other practical changes in how they see procurement working?
Yes. They talk about replacing some current requirements with helpful buyer guides. This kind of suggests a shift, maybe, towards a more advisory role in certain areas rather than strict mandates for everything.
Interesting.
And the big picture goal, they say, is to prioritize results above all else, getting the best products and services at the best cost for the taxpayer.
Results over process, basically.
That seems to be the theme. And they give a concrete example. They state they will end the procurement of things they deem useless and wasteful products like paper straws.
Okay. So what's the deeper rationale here? Why do they think this shift away from meticulous rule following towards results and common sense will actually work better?
Well, the officials argue that the current system, because it demands such strict adherence to every rule, even if rules are old or overlap or even contradict each other sometimes, it just breeds inefficiency. It causes stagnation and administrative bloat because, again, navigating all that requires significant effort and resources.
Which leads back to the idea that only the big companies with lots of lawyers and consultants can really thrive in that environment.
Precisely. It stifles competition, they believe, from potentially better, cheaper, or more innovative providers who just can't handle the compliance burden.
Did they give any other examples of rules they think are unnecessary, besides the paper straws?
They did. They offered a couple of examples of what they termed plain, foolish, far-R provisions to illustrate the point.
Okay, like what?
One was a requirement that all paper submissions have to be printed double-sided, and the paper must contain at least 30% post-consumer fiber.
Okay, specific. And the other?
The other was a mandate that government contractors have to conduct employee training on the dangers of texting while driving.
Texting and driving training. But aren't there already laws against that? And tons of public awareness campaigns. It seems kind of redundant for a procurement rule.
That's exactly the point they're making. They see it as duplicative, adding unnecessary burden and cost for businesses that contract with the government.
Right.
And what's really interesting is they then say those two examples, the paper requirement and the texting driving training. Together, they represent less than half of 1% of the entire FAR.
Wow. Okay, so the implication is?
The implication is that the FAR is likely filled with many, many more similar requirements that they see as outdated, inefficient, or just plain unnecessary.
And managing and enforcing all of that complexity takes a toll.
That's their assertion. They estimate that tens of thousands of government employees are needed just to oversee and enforce these regulations. And on the other side, private businesses spend a significant amount just trying to stay compliant.
So the hope is simplifying saves money and time on both sides.
That's the idea, freeing up resources, both public and private, and ultimately saving taxpayer money.
It sounds like this initiative isn't just about rewriting the rules, but also about how the whole process works and how visible it is.
That's right. They also highlighted a plan to launch a brand new website.
Okay. For what purpose?
It's designed to bring much greater transparency to the whole federal procurement process. The idea is to make it easier for industry folks and the public, too, to track regulatory updates, access those buyer guides they mentioned, and generally just understand what's going on.
More transparency in how nearly $1 trillion is spent. That sounds like something most people could get behind.
You'd think so. It's often a key demand when talking about government spending.
So, boiling it all down, what's the kind of core message these officials want people to take away from this whole FAR overhaul plan?
The central idea they're trying to convey, as they put it, is that the old standard of good enough for government work is no longer good enough.
Setting a higher bar.
Exactly. And they express quite a bit of optimism. They believe this revolutionary FAR overhaul, their term, will ultimately benefit taxpayers, the industry that sells to the government, and the government agencies themselves. They frame it as a win-win-win.
And just to remind everyone listening, these perspectives are coming from Dr. Kevin Rhodes, who's a senior advisor at OMB, the Office of Management and Budget.
Correct. And Stephen Ahizikian, the acting head of the GSA, the General Services Administration.
Right.
And also Josh Greenbaum, who is the commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service, which is part of GSA. And their commentary, as we said, was published April 16th, the day after the executive order dropped.
Okay, so let's try to summarize our deep dive here. The Trump administration has kicked off a major effort to rewrite the rules for federal government purchasing.
Yeah. A massive system.
And the main reasons given are perceived waste, inefficiency, and just excessive complexity in the current federal acquisition regulation, the FAR.
Right. And the proposed fix involves simplifying the FAR, writing it in plain English, cutting out rules they see as duplicative or unnecessary, including specific mentions of DEI and wokeness-related regulations.
According to them.
According to them, yes.
Hopefully.
And also shifting focus towards results, using buyer guides, and increasing transparency through a new website.
The ultimate goals being saving taxpayer money and making sure the government gets better value for what it buys.
That's the stated aim. You've pretty much covered the key elements they laid out. It's definitely a significant initiative targeting a really vast and complex part of government operations.
It really is. Well, hopefully this discussion has given everyone a clearer grasp of what this FAA overhaul entails, at least based on the administration's initial announcements and commentary. Now, thinking about this, considering the sheer scale of this spending, nearly $1 trillion, and the long, tangled history of government procurement reform attempts, it does leave you wondering, what do you think the biggest obstacles might be to actually implementing such sweeping changes? And maybe more importantly, what specific metrics, beyond just, counting the pages in the rule book, would actually tell us if this initiative is truly successful in achieving those goals of better value and efficiency?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? Definitely something to chew on.
It certainly is. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me today.